things that I know, which will help me move through this reality, basically with different choices, make different choices, and stay safe. Because a lot of the stuff out here is toxic, and you wouldn't know it unless you knew how the advanced technology works, or if you're listening to your inner senses, and that relates to what was represented as myth or tradition culture in previous times, to the degree where they may have had some type of guidance giving them that information awareness to protect themselves, and over time it becomes degraded into tradition, because that's just how it is. They forget the meaning, the reason behind it, and so there's an issue with that, because if we don't maintain the knowledge of how things work, then it becomes tradition, ritual, and the knowledge becomes magic, explained under a large categorization or blanket category of magic, and that's not as helpful as knowing the more direct reasons. However, that those don't don't always explain the cause, and they don't take away from the presence of that concept, that notion within the explanation of magic, which is just simply incomplete. It doesn't mean that it's not what magic is thought to be, because it just means that everything is kept up within that. There's a bad way of explaining it, but basically you figure out more, and it's like, this is how that works. It's like, oh, we figured it out. That's the science behind it. You get the full science that wasn't edited, and there's just more questions that introduces more magical notions that you couldn't explain purely with science as far as the causality behind it, because basically the more we see, the more there is to learn and see. It's been made to look opposite. Everything, literally, the knowing of things, of reality, knowing itself has been corrupted to the degree where everything's backwards, and we think we're in an empty cube, and you look through everything, and the more you look, then the less there is to find, and it's the opposite. Meaning we're in a growing, inside-out turtle donut thing, and the more you look, the more it expands. The more you look that way, the bigger the inside behind you gets. It doesn't make any sense as far as materialist reductionist, but that's the idea. And so, which is a weird way of explaining that I've learned things that basically I integrate or apply in everyday life. But that's all that is going to happen with these types of situations, or the really period. Whether it's like a one-time event for somebody who's been through something strange, like some of these unexplainable experiences, or something more continuous and or purely traumatizing. It's going to induce learning, or it's going to induce a better ability to navigate seemingly confusing reality, because everything, well, this is what I'm getting at, everything is based upon that information, the information that's basically the hidden information, even in a way occult information, because it's the underlying nature of how things work. But I want to, I'm walking a line with that, because I'm not really going to say that there's hidden causes and mechanisms that enables consciousness and what we experience as reality, or what we refer to as reality in a way. That could be a widely used term, but it doesn't mean that it's like I'm not encouraging one to attempt to manipulate hidden forces, basically. Even though the way your mind works is literally a hidden force. Think about it. Where's your mind? So that simple, sentence right there brings out the complexity and simplicity of the situation. Because it's easy to understand that you have a mind, but it's not physical, because you're using it right now to conceptualize things. But it's difficult to describe and answer the question of where it really is. And so, and the idea is it's not a location. It's an abstraction. As I was saying right before I lost the thread, it's about learning and the how that information influences all of reality. I have to better explain myself. I've been delirious for about 3 days now. I don't know why. It turned into a head cold or something, and so it's literally like my head is a balloon filled with water, and for some reason my thoughts are the same. Uh, it's like I'm drunk, super drunk or something. And I don't drink. Haven't drinking the longest time, but just to say it's toxic. So I was saying though that the stuff that happened there and the stuff that happens in these projects influences daily life today or years later, and as well for myself and as well for the world. The information, the events there are defining this reality, are initiating change in aspects of the control system that influences everything. And on top of that, the occult, the hidden aspect of the universe, the energy, the spiritual universe, is it's like the pinnacle or the center. It's where change first forms, and observation, existence, everything happens there. Everything starts there. Everything finalizes there, and then we see that it changes here. But it basically what I said is a spiritual information is the core of the information, and then out here is the projection, the graphical user system, the interface. It's a material hologram. It doesn't mean it's not real. It means that this hologram is made of atoms, but they're all just atoms. It's not. There's no. Anyway. Yeah, it's a difficult concept to get beyond that layer of theorizing it, or conceptualizing it, but to look and actually understand how it could actually fit into place. It kind of changes your mind, because the whole point is it's happening right here in front of you, and everything that your mind is seeing is supposed to look in correspondence with the rest of the information in the rest of the hologram. But the idea is it's just information. It can only ever be just information, because that's all anything can be at its core. So all you ever have is some type of true information, and then a projection system. And projection is like a simulated space that is an abstraction. It's not actually in a location. And then you have the information and some type of processing system. We're in a larger mind, basically. But how did I do it again? And so, yeah, so that information, okay, so then here's an interesting kind of question, maybe, is that there's scripture written that says, what happens on earth happens in heaven. And shout out to, man, I forgot his name, I gotta look it up. Dude on YouTube, he did the wow, what is all movies come up? Soulless, the Wise Servant, yeah, We're All Spirits in Hell. He did that video, and I liked it. I liked the flow. And there's more information coming, room for expansion. But shout out to him, because he looked at the scripture, and as well he has the idea. And this is also what I was informed of, and as well, if you think about it, eventually it makes sense. But what happens in earth happens in heaven, or happens in the spiritual realm, or happens out of the hologram, in the pure information place of pure awareness, instead of on the computer hard drive, instead of on the screen. So the idea is, where does it happen first? You go on the screen. Maybe this will make the video worth posting. And you click the message button or something, to use our favorite tracking system, Facebook. I just set off the servers that are going to hear that term in the video. Anyway, so you click the button, the mouse moves, you use your physical mouse, and the cursor moves, and you click, and then the code, the software code for the browser, the HTML or Java, all corresponds, and then brings up the next screen. and then eventually there's information stored on their servers that's displayed. So what happens first, or why does either happen? Does the information from the hard drive end up displayed on the screen because of change happening in the processing system itself, on the hard drive and on the motherboard, and information being displayed, or interactions basically there, informational interactions happening there, and then the information brought out? Or does it happen because the mouse on the cursor, or the cursor being moved by the mouse on the screen, clicks the software, the button, and then that interactively activates software to bring about the information on the hard drive? Does it happen because the cursor clicked something, or because the information changed on the hard drive and in the motherboard, in the processor basically, and that would be RAM? Which is which? They're both interchangeable. It's the same thing, and one doesn't technically actually exist. It's just colors on a screen. It's arbitrary. It's an abstraction. You take the hard drive, the pattern on the blocks. I can't think of the word right now. It happens a lot, but it happens anyway. You take the HTML, or the HTML, because you really do have three if you think about it. We're in this is a three-layer simulation or projection system with the computing. You have the HTML, the JavaScript, which is beneath the graphical representation that is displayed on your monitor, and those two are linked in a very close relationship, I guess you could say. And then you have below, because both of those are stored on computers, but you have the information hierarchy that enables the whole operating system basically to run and stored on the hard drive. So the information is both stored on hard drives, but one is a graphical user interface, and just beneath that you have a pure informational interface basically, which is a coding language, and then beneath that you have the computer system itself, which is literally a magnetic binary code system, which is basically the atomic, like the purest information layer of the computing system, the computing universe. And so, where could you say things are actually happening at? It's like not an unanswerable question. It's just that it's like a philosophical perspective. I can't formulate words today very well. And so, well, that's the idea. That there's information, there's hidden, occult, whatever you want to call it, invisible information, which represents change in this universe, in this existence, if you will. And not only that, but the presence of it, the experience of it in itself. Because it projects, but as well in that system, in that code, is the information that will come about, that will be led to, that will, is in the future, basically. It's in the code. And if it's, it's not that it's in the code, it's that whatever happens has to happen as an evolution from the current state of the code. So it's all connected. It's like a script, a program. It doesn't mean, again, it's like it's not real. It just means that with enough information, you can pull out the information that is currently inaccessible or invisible to you, and it's as if you're pulling it from somewhere. Basically, again, where is the mind? Where is the graphical user interface that you're using to click buttons and whatnot? Does the button actually exist? And where is the information of that universe, or not the information, but the actual universe? It's happening in your perceptions, by the way. It doesn't exist on the hard drive. It exists only in your mind. And so, so in that sense, where is the information? If you could get a powerful enough computing system to look at the genetic code, or look at the brain, basically you can map things out and develop patterns and develop a code or a series of algorithms and interactions. Where is the future information, or the information that is going to be led into, if you have a computational system that is powerful enough to predict what you're going to do or experience, or what is going to happen in a particular system? If it's accessing that, or those possible future realities or whatever you want to say, where is it getting it from? You know, it's the same thing. It's the next level of saying where on this camera device, recording device, does the image of the individual exist? Where does that person exist? It has nothing to do with the device. It's literally a magnetic code. And so the idea is that that's the beginning of basically the speculation or even theorization of higher dimensional reservoir of information. And it's not even so much a reservoir because that denotes some type of space. It's the fact that it is a computational encoding of that extra dimensional or higher information within the mathematical relationships, basically like a higher geometry folded within the code or the brain or the genetics or the computing system as it is today. The blueprint that the programmer designs of a video game or of the code to represent something must be substantial enough to then branch out to incorporate all these types of variables that could open up to a complicated enough experience that, you know, satisfies a desire for whatever the intended purpose is. And so the idea is that blueprint must be higher dimensional. It must be an extra dimensionally substantial code, otherwise you won't get the properties that enable that change through time and so on, and essentially life or consciousness or higher awareness. And so we're in that extra dimensional code, and the extra dimensional aspect of it is the invisible or the hidden, the spiritual energy. It's like you have a series of geometries. It's a series of it's a landscape found when measuring the interrelation between a series of projected alterations or points within the original blueprint or diagram, that you perform a series of algorithms of subtracting or adding or making the pattern a certain way, and you end up with a whole new landscape. That was a terrible explanation, but it's as if the information of the future, or what we call the spiritual plane, is found within the information that you find here, but is found between or through a processing system of bringing out these interrelations that reflect a higher symmetrical symmetry or geometry or a continuity, a pattern that will always be there and is always used to represent the changes that will manifest. And it's because that pattern, whoever created it or however it came about, is basically unstoppable. It's always capable of moving forward, and in that way enabling life, which again goes against the materialist reductionist perspective, because in that view life is basically screwed. There's no such thing. It just happened once because it's a fluke. It's probably never going to happen again. And it's just like, who would have ever thought of life? Like, could you imagine that's an accident? Meanwhile, you don't have anything unless you have that, because it's happening in here. And so it's a play, a storyline that's brought out to make it look like it's the most invisible thing ever, because the only thing we see here is so minute that it can be only what is responsible or influential for what we consider our experience here. When actually it's reversed, because without the experience of basically the conscious experience, you don't have the ability to degrade life and say that couldn't be happening, it's never going to happen again. The only time one has the ability to do that is when they're alive, and the only time they're alive, so it's happening 100% of the time. Which is it's like a semantics mind game, but the idea is it doesn't have to be that way. It could just be people going, yeah, of course there's life, that's what it is, and eventually we are opened up by some virtue of sympathy, basically, with one's own resonance system. You're opened up to this invisible information, which is feeling. It's spiritual sense, it's feeling, and without emotional programming and things like that. And so it's like a game that's being played right now to see how far we can push the illusion and bend it without breaking it, to see that this is basically it's the most information pushed to the invisible side and the least amount of information present in the manifested physical arena, basically. And so, which is, many would say it's a bad idea, but that's what's happening. It's an experiment to push that and see how stupid we can become, which is, again, a trick, because that may be a part of the goal. The only people that are fully enforcing that are those who are saying, yep, that's the trick, and then we make you stupid, and then we take all the money and go over here and we keep all the intelligence for ourselves. So inherently it may just be a trick for people to say, this is a cycle of history, this is the nature of what's happening. People get dumb and then you get smart again later, but right now you're dumb. But the idea is that it can only be that way ever, because that's what's happening right now. And it doesn't mean, not ever, but I mean for like right now, that's the only true explanation of it. Because until, even if it's you know, beyond whether it's a trick or not, that's what's happening. And until people stand up and want to know about how their legal system or their banking system or the medicinal system, the chemical structure of how their body works, the immune system, how the brain works and consciousness, you know, physics, how, whether that's actually possible or whether people can really do that, or whether the technology is so far beyond that in terms of advancement of what happened in the 1900s and the 1940s and 60s and so on, that that can only be a misdirection at the very least. And I'm talking about certain events on the news or certain things in history or certain projected scientific feats or things like that. And these can only be brought up to misdirect people or flat out lies. And we're so far beyond that that you would never even want to do that, because it doesn't even make sense. And all it is to misdirect people from what's really going on, whether it's changes in the control structure, basically, and decisions that are made, and they're represented this way. Corporations are winning out over rights and things like that in nature, but it's represented as this, or whether it's technology covered up and advancements basically hidden for the longest time, and people basically kind of washed away out of history. All you have to do is look at it, and eventually you'll see, you know, what it is to see. They can say, anybody can say, yeah, but it's okay because it's part of this. And you don't have to believe it, or somebody could believe it. It doesn't change anything about what's actually happening, that it's a series of fraudulent behavior that's basically shaped the way this universe, or this reality works, this society works. But the idea is it's being pushed to, even if it's through abuse of ignorant people, it's to push that membrane of that information between the graphical system and the computing system so thick, not thin, but so thick, that, and it's really so polarized towards the graphical system, that a little spectrum of information, a narrow band, is available on that computer screen, and all of the information is kept. It's made hidden. The folders are made so you need administrative access. They're using a very light operating system. You can't get access to anything. You just see this kind of blank screen with a couple squares on it, and the rest of the information is hidden on the hard drive. Unless you have access to that, you don't get any of the technology, any of the power, the weld, the truth. You don't know what's going on. Blah blah blah. And but that's basically what's going on and what's happening. And it's the strangest thing, because I've been ranting here, because I don't want to say what's really been happening, which is some weird stuff. But basically, they began Mark 4, permanent clones. And by that, it's temporarily permanent, which is the strangest thing. And so that's what's been happening. But it's not that I don't want it to be happening. It's that I wish I would have paid more attention when there were basically initial trials for it. Also realizing I've been dehydrated. A whole bunch of stuff going on. You might have seen the post. If not, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But the idea is that that's the ultimate hidden information, that not only is all of it being misrepresented and pushed away into ignorance, is slowly going to come back, because now you have the majority of how things work being manufactured, represented, controlled, manipulated, constipulated, is that a word? From this hidden reality. But that doesn't mean they're in another dimension. Not all of them. It literally means over there in those fancy buildings with the big columns and so on and so forth. Everything's happening behind closed doors, and you have no idea what they're really doing and what really goes on to plan this reality. It manifests itself like a hologram in every element of one's life until there's a mind fracture between the conscious and the unconscious mind, and people themselves are walking around in this zombified state of being. And that's the project. But the idea is that it's going to so many different levels, and they're all going instantly in a multitude of directions that, because of the way the control system works, with power shifting from central leaders, okay, each group, the whole thing split up by factions that are a part of cardinal groups, essentially, and I don't mean that in the traditional way that they use the word cardinal, but it's as if it's a diagram of intentions, areas of the population that are manipulated and controlled, skills, chemical, social engineering, artistic, technological, visual, editing, entertainment, media, basically, wherever they have, and there's just groups, and they all control different aspects of whatever they're doing. They're all incorporated, or they're all, it's like teams, like baseball teams, they're communicated and interconnected through a hierarchy, and each hierarchy leads to another layer, and at the top of the individual groups, they all communicate through those layers, those leaders, and then all those to the rest and the rest and the rest until it's all a huge pyramidal hierarchy. And but the idea is, because of whatever happened long ago that began the shift from information being equally shared between the graphical user side, the interface, or the waking side, or the living, and the immortal, or the invisible, the soul layer, and then beyond the spiritual layer side, or the processing and the hard drive or whatever, because something initiated that shift, we're all the way at a point where everything that happens, everything that initiates change, every aspect of the reality, the control system, is hidden. It's inherently hidden. It's as if it's been squeegeed out of the entire realm, as if magic did it, as if all the books were rewritten, all the artifacts were planted, all the ancient societies and cities were manufactured and placed there, and all the bones were brought about, and all the whole thing. It's because it's like a hologram, and whatever happens in the center or at the beginning in a centralizing, influential period or way, meaning somewhere in the beginning of civilization, somebody invented a technology or device that shaped the way our genes work, that made us really healthy and strong at a certain point, and that influenced the rest of history. Or somebody messed a bunch of stuff up. We're experiencing that, because you imagine if somebody didn't, well, over here, there's a difference between heaven and hell, okay? The difference is so great. And so there's power, the entire weight of the universe, like being at the bottom of the ocean, the weight of the universe is between us and the far past, and that amount of change, the waves grow to be so drastic or so influential by the time they reach here that whatever happens there shapes everything. And so the idea is that at that point in time, there was a plan to change everything, to take everything over, to make everything hidden, to hide. And that started a trend which reflected holographically through the system we're in to turn everything inside out and turn everything into an illusion. But it also wasn't. It's just the strangest thing, because you could say, well, that was because they discovered it's illusory, the way the brain works and consciousness. It's just like an organic, graphical user interface system. It's the same thing as that, illusory. This is what it's meant. You see me on the screen right now. It's an illusion that I'm in the screen. That's the whole point. And it also doesn't mean that I'm real in the screen, so don't turn the TV off. Where am I going to go? I'm real in organic some other place, but the whole aspect of me being on the screen is an illusion. That's the whole point. So then the idea of, well, is it real or is it not? Like, it's kind of not even a applicable question because of the context, the way it's situated, set up. And so that's one possibility, that they didn't go to this area and activate this device and make this oath that they're going to sacrifice knowledge and awareness in order to control the rest of the planet. It's just that they stumbled upon this place and activated this device, and they saw that their minds are a graphical user interface for some higher system, and they're like, it's an illusion, it's a trick, it's a game. And then that initiated that change all throughout history. And then all the people that are here now and are basically manipulating it for control and basic dark ways, they just found, the system as it is now, and the system of society, and they just took advantage of people, because people are gullible, just like, I guess children, or infantile, if I can say that, humanity that's basically being taken advantage of by either beings who have higher knowledge or people who are simply willing to take advantage of them and really don't even know about the hidden side of things, which is crazy, but that's how it all works, that the hidden side must organize with the graphical side, and in however way it does, and that's what happens, but doesn't necessarily mean that's going to control how things work. It's just going to make sure there's a connection between the two sides there, so that the universe is whole, and that the hemispheres of the collective mind are balanced. But the idea is that might not mean everything is solved. That might mean everything is just as messed up as it is, and it's up to the system itself, or the collective mind, or us to change things. But so the idea is that whether there was an initial malevolent intention at the beginning of all of this to change reality, or whether the way things were figured out and the things that were done altered reality in a way that created this type of wave pattern of novelty, but represented as a kind of delusion, a spiritual delusion that has extended and resulted in continuous wars and destroying ourselves, self-destructive tendencies on a global scale, or global spiritual system-wide scale, which would make it look, if this is a graphical user interface of a computer system or a spiritual system of just energy in eternity, it would look like a virus was infecting the system. If everything was like The Sims or something, and then like one by one, like sectors were shutting down because the code was breaking down or something. Okay, that would look like a spiritual virus taking everything over. But the idea is that that trickling down of change through time from these events that happened long ago, and in some type of very influential manner using technology, or a combination of that and a location where it enables influence on the subatomic layers of the universe, on atomic energy itself, it's all energy apparently. Basically, what happens if you perform a science experiment where you take you take space itself, you take atomic space or particles and energy at that level, or even below in the quantum, subquantum, and or beyond that into some of these super fine or subtle, almost paradoxical energies, and that are called particles, and they're all called particles, but they're energies that are responsible for something like the direction of information through time. And so, what if you take those and you change them in a way that is as if you took a big geometric fractal pattern and you put it into a cube, and the pattern is what the realm is made out of, but you wrapped some of it up like a blanket, and you took some of the blanket and you coiled it up and wrapped it up, and then you put that in the little cube that you're going to influence. And you electrocute the blanket and inject it with some dye, and you change it, and then you let the box go, and the whole blanket world world that you're in goes from an orange, curvy fractal pattern to a blue-green sharp fractal pattern. And it's because you manipulated some aspect of the hologram on a fundamental layer that would then reflect throughout the rest of the hologram. So that's how these experiments played out, and a lot of it was done at the beginning of time through these cube devices that can send information back to shape the universe the way it is now, that would ensure that certain bloodlines were kept in power. There, I said it. And they took children to open the gateways because it's a beautiful system, and children can access beginning of time, heaven, whatever you want to call it. But people whose hearts are cold and closed off are automatically kept out. There's a barrier, an electromagnetic barrier that is automatically in their way, and it kills anyone that tries to pass it. Which is amazing because it's like the system is protecting itself. But that was that, and so the idea is that somebody somewhere along the line either messed it up or changed it to the degree where stupidity and mass ignorance is the inherent norm or the default, and in that sense you need to make a deal basically to get power in this place, which is the illusion. And so because it's like going and pressing the button over and over again, and the button doesn't work, and really all you want to do is eject the CD. Old school here, just the CD. And the guy that's smart either opens up command line, I can't think of the words right now, and it hits the eject command, or just presses the button on the device. The other person, the ignorant person, okay, is over there clicking the button over and over and over again. They can't figure it out. So that's the idea. It's easy to manipulate people. It's easy to get them to do what you want if they don't have the other half of the equation, the other side of the reality of the story. And in that same sense, you can control who's going from the graphical side to the other side, who's getting information, who's dreaming through spiritual connections, who's living and dying, etc., immortality. You can control all of that. If you control where that line is, whether it's on 99% of the map and only 1% is visual, or whether it's over at 50 or 1% of the map and all the information is here. There's friggin', fairies floating around, which I don't know why there would be fairies. I know there's a background behind all that, but anyway, they're basically all the information that's in our mind, all the information that is part of our subconscious, our imagination, our dreams, etc., would also be present while we're awake. However it would translate. Doesn't mean they might be flying around, but say there's some aspect of your dreams that relate to that mythical essence, the archetypes within. Well, you would have these essences all day because we would be it would be as if they're from the beginning, that we didn't have this barrier between the conscious mind and the unconscious, and we can talk about these things and we can know about these things and grow around and in a world incorporating these concepts instead of having these concepts shaved out of our reality. And so we would have stores that you can buy things that you look at and something happens, and they're spiritual tools or something like that, where it helps you focus in certain ways that help the mind and the heart, but the energetic values and experiences behind that. The closest thing we have in this world to that is art, and it's because you have art and science, subjective creativity, and a polarization between knowledge, which is a fucking illusion. It means you have to be fucking artistic and stupid or scientific and boring and not creative. It's an illusion. It has no. The only true artists and scientists are the original women shaman from the beginning that represent and reflect that creativity, and that's the original human. That's how it's supposed to actually be. But the idea is, you can't see back then they made changes, and many of the people from the projects have seen the other side. And in that side, you have places that you go to because it wakes your heart up. If you go to a place and it's like you don't want to be there, that place doesn't exist very long, or it never does at all. Here, you go to a place because you don't want to be there, where you get food that's poisonous, or you're stuck there because you need to do this because you'll die if you don't do this, or you don't have certain resources or something. It's the exact opposite. This is considered a shadow mirror world or a hell compared to that place. And it's just because of subtle changes. Then there's actual hell down below, the next layer down, which is the last one in the universe, and shit does fly around and pick people off at that point. But that's another place altogether. But this is like a kind of a conscious prison, if you will. But it's really not a prison. It's a beautiful environment. It's boring. It's boring. That's what it is. It's literally just boring. But the idea is that starves the soul. That starves the spirit. It drains the life out of, a person's mind, their essence. It restricts and contracts their possibilities. If you look at it as a map of that information that a computer draws up by pulling it out of higher dimensions and showing you these spiral, almost like spirographs, but they're like these coils of possibilities that project, and you zoom into each one, and it's a version of you in a different outcome. And it's literally not like, kind of looks like it's literally like it's pulling information of you, because these are the filaments that actually exist in time in higher space. And you have, these these versions or these completed outcomes or models of you, and they're different like octaves of where the information folds and creates a most accurately or appropriately defined version of you, and then it goes into something that's less defined and more like a weird version, and then you get one that's like an actual other version of you. You have like a series of actual versions, and they're all playing out through these systems, and apparently there are a series of worlds that are other version worlds that are playing out through these systems from these primary, not archetypical or archetypal, they're these primary catastrophic or beneficial events that shaped history way in the past and resulted in a 7-layer split of different realities or worlds or realms or civilizations or earths that exist in the multiverse. And, more disclosure fun, yay. Part of the projects was that they opened up gateways that connect each one that are built into the system. That somebody built into the system, or the system developed on its own, like a self-generating code or something. Or simply based upon the way it is configured as far as certain magnets, certain mountains being magnetic and having these magnetic vorticity properties, okay, so, or vortex, and so just by the virtue of the way, what is ultimately higher dimensional physics, although it's kind of not really a term, I mean it is a term, they enable what we would call faster than light travel or transfer of information, and eventually what could be broken down to in reverse engineered as wormhole technology, or these kind of vortex areas, which are they're like sites of paranormal activity, but ultimately they're vortex areas where there are natural geometric higher configurations of energy. Basically, there's weird vortexes that just so happen to take the shape of certain Indian mandalas, if you will. Some of those are actually they're drawing vortexes that appeared in the sky, and they use them as portals. And there's always stories of people going in that town or something. I've mentioned this once or twice before, and there's somebody posted some really interesting Reddit stories of what are they, creepypasta or something like that, and they're like Mexican town, some story they've always had in their town of somebody slipping away into a cave and then finding like these two guys playing chess, and that one story they had that twist on it. And apparently these guys were playing chess for a period of time, I can't remember, and I can't remember the vibe of the story, but then they leave and they came out and it was a year later. And they were like working somewhere with some guys or something like that, I don't know, something weird. But basically there are these time tunnels. I did a horrible job of explaining that. I'm really not trying to tell the story, but to just bring and incorporate the understanding of that into my explanation and interpretation of what's going on and my transferring of the information of what's happening as far as what I've experienced to you. But you can look at those stories. Maybe somebody will post them, or I'll post a link. They're really interesting. There's these time tunnel vortexes from natural vortex energy areas all around, and basically people go in there, spend like 5 minutes, come out and like months pass, or they go in there and get lost for a couple hours, come back and like 10 years or something have passed. And there's always, or they go up to the one mountain and then come down and they're back in time, or they go up and disappear and then come back and they're like old or something like that. Like weird. There's always been stories like that, and there's always stories about tons of stuff. But wait until I figure out how to tell you what they showed and told me about World War. Was it? No, I think it was World War One. I'm sorry, I'm gonna screw that. No, it was World War Two. I always do that. It's a problem. Where there was something that happened on one of the islands that was So Paranoid Times talked about it. It was the information that was disclosed to me and shown, and some of the technology was tested on us as kids and stuff. So we all seen it. You know, it's not just like we're giving us stories. There are these rifts because somebody used one of the time devices. I can't remember which one it was, but there's a series of these. They're exotic weaponry or something that are designed in like a group of overseers oversees the use of this technology because the improper use could destroy the universe, and apparently almost or has at one point. And but you could also restart a universe or move between them. And so yeah, the improper use of it in World War II opened up time rifts over one of these islands way out of the Pacific, way out of the way, and people were going up the mountains. And again, this is on Paranoid Times, and they, I was shown about it, so it's really weird. And they were like splitting into components, like their arms would separate and their head would like pop off and keep floating, and it was as if like a fractal like shatter, a crack, if you will, through space. This terrible way of, it's a glitch in the measurement, if you will, and there was a temporal and spatial temporal distortion, and it was sustained and manifesting, and it had a caustic effect, meaning if it's not closed, it could spread and f the whole place up. And so, but they didn't know it, and they were raiding this mountain, and they were going up it and splitting into different body parts and like falling down the mountain as like arms and heads and legs, and then some of them would, and they wouldn't split or they wouldn't fall, but some of them would go up and they'd float, and then they'd get stuck in like a space-time glitch, and it was just like body parts sitting there. And apparently the dudes were like, the guys that got stuck like that instantly lost their mind and instantly were like lost souls. Like you'd have to get in a craft, track where they went, and beam their soul energy. It was literally like a fabric that just unraveled, and then pull it all back together and put it in this place and let it regrow, and then it'll like wake back up. And unless that's done, that was it, which is kind of intense, hard to understand or accept. The idea is that if you mess with space-time, your soul, your mind is all connected, so in your body, and so you kind of can't really do that. But that's also why these technologies are controlled in that way. But that was in the beginning before they really knew what could go wrong, and then there was a whole bunch of other stuff that went on that they told me that relates to that. But it leads into more information that was on Paranoid Times, that were, at least this next thing that I was shown that told and came out that's connected to that, which is that these mountains, these locations, these places have like these underground portals that shift between one sub-matrix, one of the 7-layer fractal refraction of information through this system that is actually a change, a traumatic event, series of catastrophes that you could liken to an insertion of an implanted device within our timeline, within our universe, made and propagated by these powerful beams coming from these electrogravitic craft that are operated by technically space pirates, literally a gang of people with advanced craft, and so yeah, and then a bunch of beings exist that are like mutated versions of humans. Like if humanity didn't make it a certain degree and they had to survive in a certain way by doing this, and eventually they mutated and turns to these things. And there's like 6 different versions of things that are all basically fallen from the genetic blueprint of the human, of what was intended for that. And yeah, a lot of weird stuff, but I just bounced around for like an hour and a half or something. The concept of Mark IV cloning while you're awake. Anyway, that might have been interesting for you. I can't bend my knee in the winter. I gotta heat it up before it bends. What's it called? Yeah, that was that. I'll organize myself a little later. I feel like there's a swimming pool in my head. If I turn my head, it's like cowabunga on the waves of my brains. Alright. Maybe I'll say something else. Later, of course, not now. I'm just loafing right now. Yep.